10. Good morning, Thursday morning, BBC Radio Oxford. I'm Malcolm Boyden. I want to introduce you to Bobbie Neate, first of all, this morning. Now, Bobbie always had suspicions about the past of her stepfather, Louis Stanley. Louis Stanley was quite a high flyer. He was a Formula One boss, but there was something not quite right, so Bobbie decided to delve. I do like a delver on this show. What she didn't know was that she was uncovering an explosive political scandal, which involved the former Prime Minister and the first Earl of Oxford, Herbert Asquith, a love child, that became Louis Stanley, and the rolling landscape of Sutton Courtenay. This has been described as the biggest cover-up in British political history. It's quite explosive. Let's talk to Bobbie now, shall we? She's on the line. Hi, Bobbie.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for your time. I want to start by asking a little bit about your stepfather then, Louis Stanley. Tell me about him.
Well, he wasn't a very nice stepfather. He came into my life when I was 4 or 5, and he was, well, I call him now a psychopath because he was very moody. One never knew what type of mood he was going to be in. But apart from that, he was very, very secretive, and that's what fascinated us when we got, there was 4 children, I was the youngest. As we got older, when he was so unpleasant to my mother, we started to look into his background, and of course we found this whole can of worms.
You couldn't have expected to find what you actually found,
Not
really,
at all.
could you?
Absolutely not at all, no.
Tell me a little bit about it. Let's fill in the story then. Louis Stanley was actually the love child of the Prime Minister Herbert Asquith, who at the time was sending our troops to war, the First World War. He was the Prime Minister then.
That's right. He was one of our longest-serving Prime Ministers. He was 60, married, living in number 10, and at the same time he was having an affair with his best friend's daughter, the aristocratic Venetia Stanley. Note the connection of the name with stepfather. And Venetia, as I said, was very young. She was 35 years younger than Asquith. And I believe that Asquith was a cradle snatcher because Venetia's family used to go on holiday with Asquith's family. They were that close. And the fascinating thing to me is how they managed to cover this up back in 1912. That, back to the family connection, Asquith had 7 children. His eldest daughter was Violet. She married a Bonham Carter, so she became the famous Violet Bonham Carter. But when she was young, teenager, her best friend was Venetia Stanley.
Goodness gracious me. How damaging, potentially, was this affair?
Well, it would have been very, very damaging at the time. And the scary thing to me is how many plastered it over at the time. I mean, it was a cover-up at the time. It was obvious that Asquith was writing letters to Venetia. In fact, the unbelievable bit to this is that he wrote letters with a quill pen. Note the quill pen had gone out a long time before 1912, to Venetia in cabinet meetings. Not only that, in war cabinet meetings. And I've got evidence from that from Churchill, because Winston Churchill was in that early cabinet.
Yes, and Winston Churchill calls this England's greatest security risk. It was as important, as dangerous as that. Now then, Herbert Asquith was the first Earl of Oxford. He had a country retreat in this county, in Sutton Courtenay. Did he ever take Venetia Stanley there?
Well, certainly Venetia visited, whether he took her or not, but it was where Margot, Asquith's wife, used to retreat. Certainly Venetia did visit, there's no doubt about that.
And these love letters you talk of that were written in quill, they're housed at this moment in time, aren't they, in the Bodleian Library?
They are.
Have you seen them?
I have, and I've read them. Asquith's writing is not that easy to read. They have been transcribed since. But yes, I've seen them, and there's 560 of them.
What was going through your mind when you were gradually uncovering what was to become a huge political scandal? I say what was to become, it's not really all out yet, is it?
No, there's still a cover-up. There's still...
Is there?
Well, I believe there is. Why hasn't any person come out to dispute my story, to argue against it, to support it. There's the whole story of Michael Brock, who was the original editor of the letters. I visited him in Oxford and asked him about the letters. I might add, in his book, he has not included most of the lovey-dovey part of the letters.
Why?
Why, exactly.
Do you know?
He does argue in his introduction that it's more important to put the political bits. Well, I mean, I think if you're trying to cover something up, you would.
As a person, are you bitter?
No, I'm not bitter. I'm fascinated. This story is just too good to go to the grave. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Every time you turn a corner, you think, wow, did that really happen? So, no, I'm not bitter.
How certain are you that it did really happen?
100%. No doubt about it. Even without anything else, you've got the name, you've got all my childhood stories. As I said, my stepfather was very, very secretive. But not only that, he used to be a name dropper. He was a bragger.
Yes.
And he would talk about all the names that come up. And that's the almost, as I said, scary thing to me. And I'd think, Beaverbrook? Oh, stepfather used to talk about Beaverbrook. And then there was Aga Khan and Bonham Carter. It all fits into place.
Now, this affair, let's just go back to this. Asquith actually once delayed a meeting with the king so he could be with Venetia, his lover, for an extra hour. And when she dumped him, he said, and I think this is a quote, "If there had been a pistol around, I might have shot myself," adding that he'd struggle with the demands of government if she didn't stand by him. Yet, as I've said before, this was a prime minister who was taking us through the First World War.
Yeah.
Was he capable of taking us through the First World War with this going on in his background?
I don't think he was. I don't think at all. In fact, he even says, "I fear I'm in peril of breaking down." And he says that I don't feel wholeheartedly engaged in the things that appear and probably are of supreme importance. Now, that was written right in the middle of the war, February 1915.
And we'll hear a lot more about Herbert Asquith next year when it's the 100th anniversary of the First World War. I bet we won't hear too much about what actually was going on in the background, will we? Or will we? Is that your mission?
Well, my mission is for everybody to know that this man who was leading us who took his eye off the ball, or even more. He wasn't concentrating on what he was trying to do. Another example is he spent all this time writing to Venetia. He had 3 sons fighting on the front. He didn't write to one of them. And those daughters-in-law never forgave him for not writing to his own sons.
What was the relationship between Herbert Asquith, the Prime Minister, and your stepdad, his love child? Did they ever meet?
No, I don't think they ever met. Asquith died when Louis was 14, and I don't think they ever met.
Have you spoken to the Asquith family about any of this, and what reaction would they give you?
I don't know. They haven't come out of the woodwork.
OK, so you've done a book. It's called Conspiracy of Secrets. What's the reaction been to your book, generally?
Very good. People are fascinated by it, unputdownable, because it is not just about Asquith and Venetia and my stepfather. It's the whole interaction, and it's like I call it a personal detective story. I'm being called a modern Miss Marple because everything, it's putting together my childhood with the historical records. And really, it's the easiest piece of research, although I did an awful lot of research, because everything fitted in.
Did your detective work bring you to Oxfordshire very often?
It did. I came to Sutton Courtenay, and I went to see Asquith's grave. He particularly wanted to be buried in the village. As you said at the beginning, he had a house there called the Wharf. And that day I'd been to a meeting, I'd had my dog in the car, and I thought you couldn't really see the wharf from the road, so I thought I would give the dog a walk, and I walked along this footpath. And this is, again, another very strange coincidence, because it was over a little bit of running water, and it was very overgrown, and I thought to myself, I've been here before.
Oh.
And I remember exactly the time when stepfather took my mother and the other children further on, and I dilly-dallied in this quiet little stream. And as I walked past further on, there was the wharf on the other side of the river, and stepfather had definitely been investigating his own roots.
Goodness.
And to your listeners, it may not seem so odd, but that was only one of many visits. Visiting Alderley Hall in Cheshire was another one. Visiting Hoylake was another one. So,
And those letters at the Bodleian.
yes.
As a person, then, how do you feel about what you've uncovered? How do you feel? Not us, the readers of your book, potentially. How do you feel?
Fascinated. Just fascinated.
Hurt?
I am hurt. Stepfather was very unpleasant to me. I am hurt, but I am one of these people that sees why stepfather turned into the psychopathic man he was. If you've got to put it into his eyes, he was taught to lie from the cradle. He had to pretend he had a father. He didn't. As an adult, he was driven by power, status, and money. And if you think about it, he would have had those three naturally by having Asquith as a father and Venetia as a wealthy aristocratic family.
Finally, Bobbie, I mean, your story has been described as the biggest cover-up in British political history. It has Oxfordshire running right the way through the heart of it. Is it that, do you think?
Very much so. Very much so. My father was a clergyman, and his first parish was Broughton. So I've rediscovered Broughton. That was always a family secret. I had no idea where my elder brother and sister were born, but they were born in Broughton. I've since discovered people in the village that remember my father and my mother.
Conspiracy of Secrets is the name of the book. Thank you for coming on and telling us what is, well, it is an explosive tale. Thank you, Bobbie.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with it. Bobbie Neate, what do you think of that? The book is called Conspiracy of Secrets, and it's the story of a scandal involving, well, the mistress, the love child, the Prime Minister, and those love letters at the Bodleian. Fascinating stuff.